All right, well, part two of this interview is actually moving on to dealing with topics like sustainability and the environment.
Yeah.
What is Shell's stance or approach towards climate change and limiting Shell's environmental footprint?
Right, a fairly fundamental question, obviously. Contextually, if you think about energy demand and energy growth globally, most commentators, including the International Energy Agency, would say that energy demand is going to double by 2050. Between about 2000 and 2050, it's going to double.
Okay.
And a lot of that energy supply is still going to come from hydrocarbons, even in 2050, probably 2/3 still. So you specifically asked me, what is Shell doing about it? We think about it in 4 areas. So first and foremost, we think about gas, natural gas. So strategically, we've moved strongly towards natural gas, and that's for power generation. That is the cleanest burning fossil fuel. I have a very, very substantial impact on reducing climate impacts, essentially. Secondly is in liquid fuels. So we also moved into a number of joint ventures recently. So examples include biofuels, a major joint venture we have in Brazil, which again reduces environmental impact, but also LNG in transportation. So we've made a number of investments in recent years in trucks and rail and also marine shipping. So LNG has a positive impact as a fuel as well. Third area is carbon capture and storage, which is if we're fair with ourselves, it's new. We're still working to make it happen. And probably in the next decade, as an industry, we have to crack it. Fossil fuels still have a CO2 footprint. And even though natural gas is the cleanest burning and the lowest CO2 footprint, we still have CO2 to deal with. So we have to get carbon capture working and storage. And finally, we also obviously look at our own operations. So we look at efficiency of our engines that we're using to power our rigs and our transportation, fuels, reduction in gas flaring, reduction in methane emissions, and so forth. So we start at home, get our own shop in order, but then we're also thinking obviously about the total energy mix and the role of natural gas.
All right, that's a very detailed answer. Everyone knows about Shell's Prelude FLNG project and the benefits to the economy. Could you outline some of the benefits, not only to the economy, but also to the local communities?
So Prelude is becoming quite a well-known, particularly in Australia, flagship project for us. We think of it, and the industry at large now thinks of it as a game changer. It has changed the face of development of LNG, that's true. It has quite substantial cost and schedule benefit. That's quite well documented now, both here in Australia, and it's being considered, the FLNG technology is being considered quite broadly globally. So it's going to have a substantial impact upon developments. For us, it's a response to market forces. We're addressing costs, we're addressing productivity, and we're trying to make our LNG more competitive. In Australia, we are facing a lot of competition in our traditional markets. The traditional markets are Asia Pacific, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, and now Southeast Asia. But there's a lot of competition there. It's coming not only from the Middle East, but now also from Africa in the near term, but also North American gases and Canadian gas is going to be coming our way. So we must respond to that. So Prelude is the first of, I think, of many responses in the FLNG world. It has an economic benefit. So we did a piece together with an external expert, Hazel Tasman, who looked at the benefit of Prelude. They characterised it as contributing about $45 billion to Australian GDP, about $12 billion of tax revenue, $12 billion of goods and services. We also know that it employs a number of people. So the total employment, the total number of new jobs created by Prelude will be about 1,000. And those jobs are predominantly based here locally in Western Australia. You asked specifically about local aspects. Local content is obviously an important issue for all Australian companies and in many, many countries around the world. Prelude we're currently entering into the contracting phase for operations and maintenance of Prelude. And there'll be over 200 contracts let in the next couple of years for Prelude for operations and maintenance activities. We expect a local content of around 70% or more.
Okay.
So that means $200 million every year of revenue going into the West Australian business community in support of our prelude operation.
Okay.
So a lot of jobs, a lot of revenue to the government, but also a great deal of benefit in supporting the prelude business. I can only ask you to imagine what would happen if you then upscaled that. If you had several FLNGs operating offshore Australia, what the extent of benefit could be. And that's probably actually quite an important point, because once you reach that kind of scale and you have multiple ventures, you start thinking about whether we can create a global centre of something, a global centre of excellence in floating LNG. UWA, together with Curtin and CSRO, has been talking about that now for a wee while, together with Shell and others. What can we generate from this, and in terms of our export competitiveness? If you look at the UK, look at the USA, look at Norway, they've built whole hubs, centres of excellence around their industry and their businesses, and they're now exporting that capability globally, and that's where we need to get to.
How is Shell approaching the issue of increasing global energy demand with regards to sustainability?
We think, and we've strategically taken this path, that right at the heart of a sustainable future is natural gas. If we could replace our dependence on fossil fuel with renewable energy, probably we would try to move in that direction. And I mentioned earlier, I think that renewables by 2050 will probably be about a quarter of all energy sources. And we're going to need a whole range of energy supply, including hydrocarbons, nuclear, and renewables. But if a quarter is coming from renewables, we think probably 2/3 is still coming from hydrocarbons by 2050. And natural gas is at the heart of that. And we say there are three key reasons why natural gas needs to be at the heart of that. First of all, it is abundant. So we have, on the latest estimates by the IEA, on current production rates, about 250 years of production still available in discovered resources. Now, it's not all easy to get at. We need to innovate to continue to get at it. FLNG Prelude is a good example of that. Secondly, we say it is acceptable environmentally. It's got about half of the CO2 footprint of coal. It produces an awful lot less pollutants, an awful lot less particulates. So in terms of air quality, I don't know if you've been to Beijing, but in terms of air quality, it has a substantial impact. And thirdly, it is affordable. To build new generation, power generation capacity, natural gas is about half the cost of coal, a quarter the cost of nuclear, and depending on the type of wind farm, onshore, offshore, a fifth or a tenth. But I think the key point about natural gas is we see it as very complementary to renewables. A future, a sort of destination future that, as we transition, but also reach an end point where natural gas partners with renewables, I think is believable. And you can see that because of the benefits, the sustainable benefits of natural gas. I have a lot more difficulties saying the same thing about renewables with coal or renewables with oil.
Okay. That's all we have for you today. Thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions or any future topics you would like us to cover, just comment below or hit us up on Facebook. That's all from me today. I'll see you again next time.